Okay, this is Tech Denmac. Welcome back. Now, what we want to do is, as you saw my behind the screen scenes, um, let's start making our C programming command line from scratch. So let's just walk through some of the steps first. So first thing you may want to do is when you go to open a folder. What I did was I made this folder right here. You can actually right click and you can say new folder. So once you click the folder, you made the new folder. You can click on the folder, select the folder. I have my folder already selected. So now let's first let's get some setup going here. Let's get a new terminal out here. Let's test out our GCC. Okay, GCC is working. It failed because I don't have an input file. So now, first, let's start with our driver. So let's do the new file. We're going to call it driver.cc. Alright, so now, let's start with the basics, okay? So in our program that we made, we had some basics that we have to, in order to get the program running. So what I usually do is I start out with a include. So let's go include. I know that I'm going to use the standard library. So I'm just going to do the standard library.h. Okay, so stdio stio.h, and let's do the std.lib as well. So we're going to include the std.lib as well. Include. I got a new keyboard too, so trying to test that out. std.lib.h. You see how that pops up for us? Let's do a save, and let's do our int main. And we're going to deal with arguments, so let's do the args. Let's do the int argc, and let's do the char star star argv. Okay, and let's put brackets around that puppy, and we're going to do a return 0. Okay, and let's give it a run. Okay. Let's put something in here to really test out the driver. So what we're going to do is do a printf, and we're going to go and just, I got to get used to my keyboard. So I'm going to do this right here. Let's just do testing. Okay. And we can call it good like that. And we'll do something like that. Okay. So now let's run our GCC command. We'll do a GCC. Then it'll be driver.cc. Whoops. Driver.cc. I'm going to remove this for now. And then we'll do a dash out. And we'll call it driver. Okay. Let's get it to compile. I'm not going to do an intensive compile with all the verbose because I don't want to slow down my processing power or use a lot of my CPU. So we're going to call driver. And there we go. We have testing. So now let's remove this right here. And so let's see what we can do next. Okay. So we want this to accept commands. Okay. So the first thing we'll do is let's talk about how we are going to orchestrate and manage the commands that we put into the that we pass in from the outside. Okay, so just to give it a little test first, how you actually look at your commands is, remember the argc is the command count, and the argv is the actual commands that you push through the CLI. So let's do a int argc. Well, let's do x 0, and then we'll do a let's do x is less than argc, and then we'll do x plus plus, And let's put our brackets around there. And missing this right here, what we got to do it equal to. And now let's play around with some of the arguments. So let's do a printf. And once we do the printf, we're going to put in, we'll put the arguments index equal to, so we want to put in, it's going to be a digit, so we do digit, and then we want to put in the value. So this is going to do a for loop, and then let's put that as a string, and then right here it's going to do a replacement. So the first argument is going to be replaced by x, and the second argument is going to be replaced by that value that we want. So we can take this argv right here, and we can put x into here, okay? Because it's an array. And let's save it. So let's give it a run. And now let's do this. Let's test some arguments. Ashton and tech. Okay. So see how it actually printed out both arguments. So we got arg index 1, and then we have the arg index 2, which everything looks fine. Now look, arg index 0, if you notice, is the actual driver itself. Okay, so one thing you have to do is start from 1 because we don't want the file name. So let's do this. Let's do I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to do a new line every time. And what we're going to do is we're going to recompile it. And then let's give it a run, okay? So see, like right here, it gives that first argument is the full path. So remember, these are all arguments, even when I call this right here, okay? That's the first argument. Then you have the other two arguments. So you always want to start from 1, okay? So what we're going to do is, let's give it another test run. And let's go and run it, okay? So now we got our arguments coming out, okay? So those are the arguments that we want, and we tested this out, okay? So that's just to show you how arguments actually work. And so let's go over to our first system that we want to put in place, okay? So the first thing we want is something to parse those arguments from one another, okay? So what we'll want to do is we want to separate those arguments, right? So in order to separate those arguments, we have to make an algorithm to separate those arguments, okay? So let's do this. Let's prototype a arguments parser. So we're going to void, and we're going to say argument parser, and we're going to take this, and we don't want it to really return anything right now. We just want to do like a prototype of it, but I know that we want to pass in how many arguments we have, which is the argc, and we want to pass in that actual char, which will be coming from right here. We want this to have the same signature as the main function. So we can just take this, paste it over here. Okay. So let's save that. Now, we prototype it so that if we have any functions that we don't have to put our functions in order. So the compiler knows what to expect, and when we call these functions, we can actually just put a prototype up here saying that this function should be available. And what we do is write the definition of the function down here. So so all we got to do is just copy this right here. And our first algorithm is how to separate those arguments. So one thing we got to talk about is how do we want those arguments to come through? So I want the arguments to be like a CLI where I do a dash dash and then the subject as to the action I wanted to do. And then after that, I wanted to take in the rest of it, the rest of the arguments that go with that subject. So if I go dash dash add like we do, I wanted to take all the numbers that we want to add, and then if I say dash dash subtract, I want it to be smart and be able to know what numbers belong to the subtract. Okay? I want to be able to put anything in here and it be able to parse the arguments based on this dash dash taxonomy right here. Okay? So let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is we want to do a for loop through all of the arguments. Okay? So let's just take this and let's do our for loop for all the arguments right here. Okay? So now, the next thing we want to do is we want to come up with some type of algorithm to let the program know that I want you to read this, and if you see this, this is considered a command. Okay? And then after that, I want you to read until we get to another dash dash. Okay? So what we're going to do to accomplish that is we're going to start writing our own algorithm. Okay? So we do want our algorithm to start from 1. We know that as a fact. Okay? So now let's talk about some if statements. So we have a couple if statements. So we have if, let's do a string argument or something like that. If the string that we're currently looking at, or the characters that we're currently looking at contains a dash dash or something like that. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say str, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring the arg x. So we got the argv in there, x. Okay, and we want to make sure it's not null too. Okay, so and we want to do whatever we're looking for. So we're looking for it to have a subset of dash dash. If it has dash dash in it, then that's what we want. Okay, in front of it or something like that. This may not be the most strategic way to do it because I can see a lot of bugs that might occur. And we want this to say if not equal to null. Okay, so that's our first if statement right there. Okay, so what it's going to do is act as if it's like kind of like a filter, and it's going to, and if it acts as if it's a filter, then what's going to happen is it's going to take, that if statement is going to take all the arguments that have the dash dash in it when we do the separation. Okay, of each argument, because remember, each place in here is an argument starting, and each time we say, like right here, this is an argument, this is an argument, this is an argument. We have to use the program to say that these two is the argument of this action here. Okay. So now, one thing we have to add is we have to add another library, and we need to add the string library because the string library is what contains this. So I'm going to take that string library and I'm going to put the string library in here. So let me grab it. All right. So right here, what we can do is just add this in here. String.h. See how it went away? All right. So now we got that. We got the filter in there. And we can test it out if you want. I can show you how to test it out very quickly. But let's try to get like a base for the algorithm so far, and then we go back through and we tweak it. Okay. So now we have our for statement. Now let's talk about what happens after we find. What happens after we actually? How will we separate these things? Okay. So right here, we got the if statement right here. So if you run into this dash dash, okay, what do we want to do next? So let's do a print f, and what we're going to do is we're going to say like action. The action for this particular one is equal to, let's go like, let's do a string. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the replacement, which should be argvx. Okay. So if we were to test this out, then the only thing we're going to see is all of the strings that have the dash dash in front of it. Okay. So let's test it out really quick. So in order to test it out, let's take this right here. Let's go over to our driver. And what we'll do is put this in our driver. We'll take the argc away, and then we just pass in argv. All right. So now that we did that, let's give it a run and see if it filters the way we want it to filter. And it's good to compile every now and then to make sure you got everything right. All right, so look at that. Action, action. We got that separated now. Let's do one of these. Get it on a separate line. We're gonna move that later. Okay. So let's recompile. Once it recompile, we're running. Okay, so we got both of the actions separated. Okay. So now how will we get the things behind the actions? All right. So in order to get the things, like what will we know what goes with this action? Okay. So what we can do is we know that we need to go forward, right, after this action. So in order for us to go forward, what we have to do is we would have to say, okay, I want you to go forward until you do this. Okay. So what we're going to do is let's do something like a while statement. And we can do something like this. Let's say we do it in the form of an algorithm. And we want to check the next person in line. Okay? That's when we want to, in order to check the next person in line, we will have to do a little bit of math. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we want to make sure that we don't hit the ceiling of arguments. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a x plus 1 before we increment x plus 1, and we want to make sure this is less than argc, because if it's more than argc, then what's going to happen is we're going to go out of bounds. Okay, and then we're going to do a and. We're going to say like let's take, since we're doing x plus 1, let's take this right here. And we're going to say something like this. We're going to say x plus 1. Okay? And we're checking if the next in line that we're about to process has a dash dash. And if it don't have a dash dash, we're going to keep doing this while statement until the next one in line have the dash dash. And then what controls this to say that don't go over this number is this right here. So once x plus 1 is more than this number, this can stop. Okay, so we got two conditions. It has to be x plus 1 has to be within the bounds of argc, and then the next argument in line has to be false. Okay, when we do our check. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mark it as false. All right. So now what we're going to do is let's take this, and then remember when we process it, we want to move forward. So x plus plus right here. Okay. So since we did an x plus plus right here, that means that if we process this right here, we need to do an x plus plus from here. Okay. So we need to increment that number as well when we get to this point right here. Okay. So now, once we increment that number right here, what we can do is we can take this and we can say we want to print F, okay? And we can take this right here and we can print this. Let's just take this over and we'll say, we call this arg, okay? And we're gonna print the arguments that go with it, all right? So the arguments that go with it go right here. And we want to print it all on one line, and we'll do like a tab or something like that. And then once it goes x plus plus, because that means we incremented it, right? We might not need to do this shift just yet, but I'm going to keep the shift right there so that we'll be checking the next one in line, okay? I think it might break if we add both in both places, okay? So then what we want to do is once this is done, we want to print a new line, okay? So we go print F, and let's print a new line saying that everything is done, okay? So let's just put that new line out there so we start at a new line. Now, let's test it out, okay? So let's run it. If everything goes right, okay? So we got one action right here, which we got more than one action. So both of these actions should show. But let's do this. Let's go 23, 43. Let's do a small case. Okay, so see, it didn't get the 43. So let's do this. Let's not do the x plus plus right here. And let's do the x plus plus above. So right here, before we process anything, what we want to do is do our x right here. And then remember, we did a no-no right here too, because we need to be able to increment. But I think it'll be fine. I think it'll be fine. So let's test it out. Let's see how good our algorithm is. So let's compile it. Let's run it again. All right, so see how we got the action and then we got the arguments. And let's take this out of here because we want it all on the same line. Let's do like a tabbing. Let's do some tabs. And what we do is recompile it and run it again. Okay. And let's run it with something that's crazy. Okay. And look at that. It's parsing. So we built our parser. So let's go back through the code. So we start at 1. Then we ask if it has a dash dash, if dash dash is null. Okay. And if it's not null, if dash dash is not null and it's found, this is considered an action. That's the first action right there. So then before we increment, we're going to do an x plus 1. Okay. So when we do that x plus 1, what we're going to do is we're going to do an x plus plus, because that means that the last argument right here, that last argument that we had is already been processed in order to get into here. Okay. And so what we got to do is when we run it, it's going to separate all of the arguments for us, just like we see now. Okay. So now let's talk about, let's add something a little extra so we can see what those arguments are. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a variable. Let's do a variable where we do I want to be kind of conservative too. So let's make a variable as, we call it int arg index, and we set that to 0. All right. So every time we do an argument here, we would like to say argument. We want to increment the argument index. So we say plus plus. This is just for informational purposes. And so what I'm going to do is instead of, so right here with this arg right here, I want to put a number right there. So I'm going to do something like this. So it actually put the argument number just for this case right here. Okay. So I'm going to take that argument number and we do this in order. So right here is the two replacements. So the first replacement we want to be the argument index, okay? And the second replacement is going to be argv, okay? So now remember, after this while statement is done, okay, because it found the next one, argument index will need to start over, okay? But if you think about it, when it goes back through the loop and it's done with the while, it's going to start over right here. So we don't really need to do that anymore. So let's save it and let's see if we get the results that we want. Okay. So let's give it a run and see right here. With this subject or this action, this is argument 0, this is argument 1. With this action, this is argument 0, this is argument 1, argument 2. And if you notice in programming, we always start from 0. Okay. If I really wanted to be like human readable, it might be something like our index plus 1. We do an offset. Okay. Or we can just set argument 1 to right here. So just to make it simple, we'll say this is argument 1, and then we wouldn't have to do that anymore. Okay. So if we go and run it, compile it, and then if we run it, see how we started argument 1, argument 2, argument 1, 2, and 3 right here just for this subject right here. So what we have done is we made our parser, and we'll move forward with another video. This video will be making the parser, and then I'll make another video for the other functionalities of this CLI. Bye.